my name is Gina. As I sat at my small table in Charlotte, the Christmas lights casting a warm glow around me, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had led me to this moment. The smell of pot roast filled the air, and the sound of laughter from my guests Lorraine, Harvey, his wife, and daughter echoed through the apartment. It was a far cry from the Thanksgiving dinner that had set this whole chain of events in motion. I remember that Thanksgiving like it was yesterday. I walked into the dining room in Mount Fairview, and the house smelled of turkey and sage. My stepfather, Tom, was sitting in his recliner, a half-empty bottle of whiskey at his feet. His face was flushed from the alcohol, and he was watching a basketball game on TV. My mother, Lisa, was in the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on the casserole. "Set the table, Gina," she called out, not even looking up. I carried the silverware without saying a word. But when Tom barked at me to get him another bottle of wine from the pantry, I stopped in my tracks. I was an adult, not a child to be ordered around. "I'll finish these first," I told him. That was all it took. Before I knew it, he had a fork in his hand, and the sharp prongs were digging into my arm. It wasn't a deep wound, but it stung like hell. I stepped back, my breath caught in my throat. "Tom!" my mother hissed. Her voice was more scolding than alarmed. "For heaven's sake, not at the table," she said, reaching for a napkin and pressing it against the wound. "It was an accident. Don't make this into something it isn't. Family first, Gina, remember that." Those words hit me harder than the pain in my arm. I excused myself and went to the bathroom. I locked the door and took a picture of the wound on my phone. The tiny dots of blood, the red welt, and the timestamp. It was another entry for the folder I had hidden away, protected by layers of passwords and cloud storage. When I returned to the dining room, the turkey had been carved, and everyone was laughing as if nothing had happened. I sat down quietly, holding my fork, and swallowed my anger along with the stuffing. I knew I had to keep collecting evidence. After dinner, as the house settled into the familiar haze of pie and muted conversation, I thought about the folder on my laptop back in Charlotte. It wasn't just about the bruises and welts, it was about the years of financial records that told the real story. I started keeping a spreadsheet when I was 20. My mother had called me in tears one summer, saying that the car needed a major repair, and she and Tom couldn't afford it without my help. I dipped into my savings, thinking it was just a one-time thing. But that one loan turned into many. There were medical bills for Tom's knee surgery, tuition for my half-brother, Jake's, community college courses, and even payments for the family's credit card debts. Each transaction was neatly logged with dates, amounts, and notes. Over time, the totals were sickening. I realized I was more of a bank than a daughter. Now, at 31, I worked as an internal auditor for a firm in Charlotte. My colleagues joked about how obsessive I was with receipts and reconciliations, but they had no idea that this habit was born out of survival. Numbers became my shield against the chaos my family created. It all started when I was 10. My father, David, had a heart attack in the living room. He was gone before the ambulance arrived. My world shattered. And before I could even start to pick up the pieces, my mother remarried Tom. Tom was a former police officer. At first, I thought his strictness was a sign of stability. But I soon learned that his rules were like chains. After my father's funeral, I overheard neighbors talking about how my father had a life insurance policy. When I asked my mother about it, she just said there was nothing left. Everything went to the funeral. Her tone left no room for questions. As the years passed, more strange things happened. The family home, which my father had almost paid off, was suddenly refinanced under Tom's name. The college savings account I remembered my father talking about disappeared. By the time I was ready for college, my mother said there was no money, and I had to work double shifts at a coffee shop. She said it was a lesson in independence, but I knew deep down that something had been stolen from me. Tom was well respected in the community. He volunteered at the local charity and told stories about his days as a police officer. People saw him as a pillar of strength, but I heard the rumors. There were whispers about bar fights and shady deals. Each rumor made me more suspicious, but for a long time, I told myself it was just mismanagement or bad luck. But as I got older, the numbers just didn't add up. What I once thought was loss started to look like deliberate theft. I didn't say it out loud, not even to myself. But the suspicion grew stronger with every missing dollar and every evasive answer. That Thanksgiving night, as I pressed ice to my arm and scrolled through my hidden files, I knew I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. The next Saturday, just as I was finishing my grocery shopping in Charlotte, my phone rang. It was my grandmother, Edith, my father's mother. We didn't talk often, just on holidays and birthdays. But the sound of her voice was like a lifeline, pulling me back to a time before everything fell apart. "Gina," she said without any preamble. "It's time we talked." Her voice was firm. She asked me to come to her house in Mount Fairview the next afternoon. "There are things you need to see, things I should have shown you years ago," she said. The drive took about 45 minutes. The road wound past bare trees and closed-down stores. Her house was just as I remembered it, the white siding looking a bit duller with age, and the porch light on even in the afternoon. She hugged me tightly and led me straight to the dining table, where there were neat stacks of folders. "These are your father's accounts," she said, sliding the top folder towards me. Inside were bank statements, policy documents, and a copy of the mortgage from the year he died. My heart started to race as I scanned the pages. The balances were much higher than my mother had ever admitted. "There was a trust set up for your education," Edith continued. "Your father wanted you to have options. But within a few months of his death, withdrawals started. Some were small, some were large, always with vague explanations like household expenses or emergency funds. Then I saw Tom's name on things it shouldn't have been on. I looked up, my throat tight. "Mom told me everything went to the funeral," I said. Edith shook her head, her eyes wet but steady. "I've suspected for years that they were taking the money, but I didn't have proof until I got these records. I've been waiting for the day you were ready to see them." The weight of the pages pressed down on my chest. Every suspicion I had kept to myself was right there in black and white. Edith rested her hand on mine. I realized then that she hadn't just been keeping memories, she had been keeping evidence. She slid another folder across the table. It was heavier than the rest. The cover sheet read, "David Thompson Education Trust." My father's name was listed as the settlor, and mine as the beneficiary. I traced the letters with my finger, afraid that if I blinked, the paper would disappear. As we sat side by side and I turned the pages, I learned that the trust had been established a year before my father died, funded by his life insurance and part of his retirement savings. The annual statements showed the numbers growing over time, with interest compounding quietly. By the most recent entry, the balance was $235,000. My stomach twisted. That money could have changed my life. It could have paid for college, graduate school, and saved me from years of working double shifts and taking out loans. I flipped through the pages faster until one page stopped me cold. There was a withdrawal notice for $25,000, dated the year Tom had his knee surgery. The note said expense. And at the bottom was a signature that looked like mine, but it wasn't. It was written in blocky, uneven strokes, like someone trying too hard to copy it. Edith leaned closer. I had it compared. "It's a forgery. And the timing matches exactly with his hospital stay," she said. My throat closed up. It wasn't just theft, it was identity theft. They had used my name to take money from the only legacy my father had left me. Edith didn't mince words. "This isn't a family squabble, Gina. It's fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and it's criminal." She pulled a business card from her pocket and put it in front of me. "Harvey Lewis, estate attorney. I've known him since your father was alive. He can help, but you need to decide if you're ready to take action." I stared at the card, the bold print looking steady against the blur of my vision. For years, I had carried the weight of suspicion, thinking I was just imagining things. Now, the proof was right in front of me. Edith rested her hand on mine again. Your father set this up to protect you. Don't let them destroy his intentions, she said. Her words sank deep. I closed the folder slowly, feeling the paper press against my palms like a verdict. The decision was finally mine to make. Harvey's office smelled of old books and coffee. It was the kind of place where truth seemed to stick to the walls. Edith and I sat across from him as he introduced Sarah, a forensic accountant with sharp eyes and a quick mind. She spread the files across the table like a surgeon preparing for an operation. It didn't take long for the numbers to tell their story. Over 22 years, nearly $550,000 had disappeared through my mother's and Tom's hands. The trust was just one part of it. There were withdrawals from my father's 401k, checks against his life insurance, and small accounts that were closed without any explanation. Sarah circled each item with her pen, marking the totals until the page looked like a crime scene. Then she slid over a set of tax filings. Your name is here, and this signature isn't yours, she said, tapping the lines. These were filed when you were in your early 20s, claiming you had no dependents and no tuition expenses. It was convenient for them to keep more money. My stomach turned. I thought the forgery on the trust was bad enough, but seeing my identity used on government-filed documents made my skin crawl. Harvey leaned back, steepling his fingers. This isn't just mismanagement. It's fraud, forgery, and breach of fiduciary duty. A criminal case can be made if you're willing, he said. Edith reached for my hand. I've been waiting for you to be strong enough to face this. I couldn't force it on you, Gina. You had to come to this on your own, she said. Her faith in me was both a comfort and a burden. Shame washed over me as I thought about the years I had stayed silent, convincing myself it was easier to endure than to confront. Anger followed, directed at my mother. She hadn't just looked the other way, she had been part of it all. I exhaled slowly, tracing the inked circles on the page. $500,000 had been stolen right in front of my eyes. The truth was undeniable. For the first time, I felt a shift from being a victim to being a witness, ready to stand up for myself. Edith insisted on cooking the roast herself. The smell of garlic and rosemary filled her kitchen as I set out extra chairs. It looked like a normal Sunday dinner, but the stack of folders on the buffet told a different story. This was an ambush of evidence. Tom arrived first, swaggering in with Jake behind him. Their voices were too loud, trying to sound cheerful. My mother followed, her eyes darting between me and Edith, looking like a cornered animal. She froze when she saw Harvey and Sarah already seated, their briefcases at their feet. Beside them were two of Edith's church friends, known for being very outspoken. They were witnesses. We ate in an uncomfortable silence until Edith stood up and slid the first photograph onto the table. It was of my arm, red and punctured from Thanksgiving. Gasps filled the room. I kept my eyes on my plate, the memory still fresh. What is this? Tom barked. It's the truth, Edith said calmly. She laid out the spreadsheets, tax documents, and forged signatures. Sarah explained each line precisely, like a surgeon describing a procedure. Harvey added the legal details, talking about fraud, forgery, and breach of trust. My mother broke first. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "We were just trying to survive. You don't understand how hard it was." Edith's voice cut through her sobs. Surviving doesn't mean stealing your daughter's future. Tom tried to shout her down, his face red, his fists clenched. But Harvey slid another document across the table, the forged withdrawal for his knee surgery. His bluster faded into silence. The churchwomen nodded seriously. This isn't a family argument. This is a crime, one of them said. Edith leaned forward, her eyes steady. Here's your choice. You sign the restitution papers, surrender the trust, and admit your guilt, or you face a trial. The evidence is ready either way. The room was silent except for the ticking of the clock. My mother's tears fell onto her napkin. Tom's hands trembled as he reached for the pen. Jake sat there, frozen, his jaw tight, watching his family fall apart one signature at a time. I didn't touch my food again. This dinner was no longer about eating, it was about finally getting justice. The pen scratched against the paper as Tom signed his name. His jaw was so tight that the veins in his neck pulsed. My mother signed next, her hands shaking, her mascara running down her face. Jake muttered protests under his breath, saying it wasn't fair, that we were embarrassing them in front of others. But no one listened. The documents spoke louder than any of us. When the last signature was done, Edith gathered the folders with the precision of a banker closing a ledger. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. I could hear Tom's heavy breathing, my mother's muffled sobs, and Jake's restless shifting in his chair. For the first time in years, my heartbeat steadied. Within weeks, the consequences started. The mortgage company put a foreclosure notice on the family home. The vacation cabin, which they had been so proud of, was put up for sale to pay off the debts. Tom's past came back to haunt him as investigators reopened records from his previous marriage, uncovering a pattern of dishonesty that went far beyond me. I kept my distance, letting Harvey handle the details. One evening, as I was leaving Edith's porch, Jake was waiting at the end of the walk. His eyes were full of anger, the same anger I had seen since I was a child. "You destroyed us," he spat. "You couldn't just let things be." I met his glare without flinching. "I didn't destroy anything. Your family destroyed itself." "I just stopped paying for your mistakes," I said. He flinched at my words but didn't say anything more. I walked past him, my keys tight in my hand, and didn't look back. By the time I got back to Charlotte that night, the world seemed bigger than ever. The mess was theirs to deal with. What I had now was a chance at a new beginning. Back in Charlotte, I started by opening new bank accounts in my own name, out of reach of anyone else. The restitution money from the trust was transferred in clean, steady numbers. I moved my savings, closed the old accounts, and let Harvey's office take care of the paperwork to make the separation complete. For the first time in my adult life, my money was truly mine. At night, I started researching MBA programs. It was something I had always thought was impossible, but now it seemed within reach. Applications from Wharton, Duke, and UNC Chapel Hill were spread across my desk like a new map of my future. Each one asked for essays about resilience, leadership, and vision. I had more than enough material for all of them. Meanwhile, news from Mount Fairview trickled in. Tom started drinking even more, and his health finally gave out. The doctor said it was liver failure. My mother withdrew into herself, no longer the sharp-tongued woman who could come up with excuses for everything. Her depression kept her at home, the curtains drawn against the outside world. Jake called me often at first, his voicemails full of anger. He accused me of betraying the family, of choosing money over blood. I let each message play without responding. The anger in his voice lost its power with each repetition. Eventually, his calls became less frequent, but the bitterness remained. In my apartment, I framed the letter my father had written to me when I was 10. The words, "Be smart. Don't let them dim your light," had been in a shoebox for years. I hung it above my desk as a reminder that his voice still reached me, even after all these years. Relief spread through me slowly, like a gentle hum in the background of my days. But there was also an emptiness, the kind that comes when winning means losing the people who were supposed to love you the most. And yet, in that empty space, something stronger was starting to grow. This Christmas was different. There was no obligation, no dread. I set my small table with a simple red runner, mismatched plates, and the smell of pot roast filled the apartment. Edith arrived first, carrying her famous apple pie. Her smile lit up the room before she even took off her coat. Harvey came with his wife and daughter, and their laughter filled the air like carols. We ate until our plates were clean, passing food without any tension, pouring wine without anyone giving orders. The conversation flowed easily, full of stories about school, church, and work. No one raised their voices, no one put anyone down. The only sharp sounds were the clinking of forks against plates and the laughter that followed shared memories. At one point, Edith reached across the table and put her warm hand on mine.